Esel Kimisalech Noach. Ba'Avram Hoyome Hisalech Lefonai. Avram Hashem says to him, walk before me. That means he's walking independent of God. Walk before me. Asher Salachti Lefonov. I walk before him. Noach needed support, intervention to keep him up. Meaning without Hashem's assistance, he wouldn't have succeeded. Avram continuously was empowered and strengthened and continuously to be driven by his righteousness. You know, certain people, what is the basis for their level of advancement? It's competition. When you compete with others, even though that's not the concept, but you always gauge your own value and accomplish based on others. Once you're way ahead of the others, the average person plateaus. People advance, and when they're ahead of the others, and then none in their pair level, they plateau. But a person who's self-motivated, whether he was on a desert island or he was with others, he's motivated because he understands what he has to accomplish. He has an objective, and he wants to achieve that objective. That was Avram. Avram himself, because he had a level of understanding, he was driven by that objective, and therefore he continued to advance. On the other hand, Noach, he needed that assistance because he would have plateaued, and therefore he did not succeed to the degree that Avram succeeded. And therefore Avram saved his generation, saved the world, and Noach did not save the world. You know, I'd mentioned the pasuk, the Navi refers to the waters of the great flood as Mei Noach. That's the Haftorah we read. It's the waters of Noach. And because Noach could have succeeded, but he fell short, and therefore he did not succeed, the world was destroyed. And his good deeds only were enough to save himself and his family. Avram, on the other hand, the Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, there were 10 generations from Noach to Avram, and Avram received reward for all 10 generations. Avram Avinu received reward for all 10 generations. So Rabbeinu Yonah explains over there that what the 10 generations were supposed to accomplish, spiritually speaking, to give the world value, Avram was able to accomplish that. As a result of that's why God did not destroy the world after 10 generations. Noach, what the world was supposed to achieve, they did not achieve, and Noach wasn't able to fill in the gap. And because he couldn't pick up the shortfall, Hashem says, it's not worthwhile for me to maintain this existence. And therefore he ended it, but Noach's own level of achievement was enough to save himself and his family for the future. So we see Avram, that's Rabbeinu Yonah. So Avram did not tzad. He was able to soar and advance because he was self-motivated, and that self-motivation, he was able to cover the deficit of the 10 generations. And therefore, Kibul Schar Keneged Kulam. He was meritorious to the point that he received reward for all 10 generations. We mentioned when we studied at one time, Rav Chaim Volozhin, Nefesh Chaim, he explains, it says, there were 10 generations from Noach to Avram. And then it concludes, and Avram Avinu, Kibul Schar Keneged Kulam. Avram Avinu, our patriarch, he received reward for the equivalent of all 10 generations, what they were supposed to accomplish. Why all of a sudden we're going from Avram to Avram Avinu? That the reason why Avram merited to be the founding father of the Jewish people was because the world exists only because of Avram. Avram saved the world. The reason why the world was able to continue was because Avram was able to pick up the shortfall of existence. And so Kibul Schar received Schar Keneged Kulam, who received the reward of all the 10 generations, that he accomplished what they were supposed to accomplish. Avram Avinu. Because he achieved that, therefore he's Avram Avinu. He's the founding patriarch of the Jewish people. And that's Avram Lo Yitzor Chesad. Avram did not need that assistance because he was self-motivated. He was driven not by comparison relative to others. As a result of that, he was able to achieve that, which Noach was not able to achieve that. Find that from that Noach is referred to as Kadnei Amona. He had a certain deficiency in his belief in Hashem. Why? Because although he built the ark, the Teva, for 120 years, when he was told to go into the ark, he did not go in immediately into the Teva. The Torah tells us he went in and they may hamabel. He was forced to go in because when he saw the flood waters rising, he realized he better go in, otherwise he's not going to survive. I mean, but Hashem had told him to go in. Why wasn't that enough? Hashem says, it's time. I'm bringing the great flood. Go in. Until he saw it himself, he did not go in. He was forced to go in because of the flood waters. As a result of that, Chazal depict him as Katnei Amonim. He's a small believer. There was a deficiency in his belief. Right? That's what it says. What's the reason? Because again, Avram, that could have never happened. Hashem says, do it. He does it. Because again, who is Noach? He needed Hashem to hold his hand. If he didn't hold his hand, so now it's coming to a moment, he failed. He failed. When Hashem says, go into the table, what does that mean? That means all humanity that you could have succeeded, and now it's going to be destroyed. And there's not going to be a trace of that existence. It's due to your failing. As I said, you know what kind of pill that's to swallow. He has to acknowledge that. To be able to accept that, it's overwhelmingly impossible because his conscience. Therefore, until he deluded himself, until he saw it actually happen, he didn't believe what was going to happen because he couldn't accept that he failed. When he saw the flood waters coming, and it's now or never, he better get in, only then did he go in. Then it was a confirmation, you failed, he was forced to go in. It was no longer his belief. That he was in real time at that moment. Noach gave birth, had fathered 3 sons. Shem, Chom, and Yofis. So the obvious question is, the end of Bereshis, the Torah says, Noach was 500 years old, and he fathered 3 sons. Shem, Chom, and Yofis. I mean, why is the Torah repeating this? Right? This is information we already were aware of. So here, there's a very interesting supporno. You know, there's such a thing as, it's called a segula. To be merit certain situations, you have to be meritorious. Noach, the way the Sephara learns, that he was 500 years old, he still didn't have children. When he was given the task to start the outreach, in that merit, he had 3 sons. That's what the Torah is revealing. Initially, it says he had 3 sons. Now the Torah is telling us, why did he merit to have the 3 sons? That because he took responsibility for others, to bring them back to God, in that merit, Hashem gave him the ability to father 3 sons. That's a Sephardo. It's a skula, so a person gets involved in outreach. You know, I always say, Hashem says to a person, you worry about my children, I'll worry about your children. That's the way it works. We're speaking about the Jewish people, especially. You take care of my children, I will take care of your children. And that's really, that's a mida keneged mida. It's measure for measure. You have no children. You take care of my children. You're concerned about my children. You sacrifice and dedicated. That would be a segula for you to merit to have children. Okay? The earth became corrupted before Elokim. The land was filled with thievery. Chomos. Take a look in Rashi. It became corrupted. What's corruption? Loshen erva avodah zora. Hashchoso is an expression of sexual impropriety, meaning with incest and adultery and homosexuality, bestiality. That's loshen erva. Avodah zara and idolatry. They sank to the lowest level of spirituality. Then even the species did not procreate with their own species. That's how corrupted the world became. V'timol it's chomas gezel. That's thievery. They stole from one another. Now over here, the Or Chaim HaKadosh makes the point. We find that all the appellations here are Elokim, attribute of justice. So the simple understanding is, Ish Sadik Tomim Hoyim Derosov Es Elokim Salech Noach. It should say Es Hashem Salech Noach. This parsha starts, it's Elokim, 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 Midas Adin. So according to Chazal, the Chazal tell us that there are times where even the Midas HaRachmim is an agreement that there's no place for mercy any longer. And therefore, as there's times where we could overturn Midas Adin into Midas HaRachmim, that even Midas Adin concurs, agrees that there should be mercy. But the times that even the attribute of mercy agrees there's no place for mercy, because they've been given every opportunity, there's no hope. And because there's no hope, it's over. As a result of that, that's why it's Elokim. The Midas Elokim, the Midas Adin came, the prosecution was that you couldn't respond to this prosecution. There was no way out. But it's interesting. It says, Es Elokim is Salech Noach. Remember, I mentioned yesterday the Chazal, it tracks all the situations of Elokim Yivakish Nirdov, where people were pursued and Hashem favored the pursued. The first one we said was Cain and Hevel. And that's why Hashem favored the sacrifice of Hevel over Cain. The second person who was a Nirdov, who was pursued by the members of his generation, was Noach. Noach himself, for 120 years, engaged in this dialogue, and they said to him, if we see at the end of the day, you're building this ark that God's going to destroy us, we're going to destroy you, we're going to kill you, we'll destroy the ark, and you're not going to have a chance to survive. And they hounded him. And I mentioned yesterday, the Chazal tell us that every anniversary of the beginning of this project, the world would gather around Noach, and they would actually disgrace him. He's Noach, where's the flood? You've been talking about the flood all these years, where is it? And he says, it's coming. If you don't do tshuva by a certain date, it's coming. So they would say to him, Noach, if the flood comes, it's on you and your family. It has nothing to do with us. We're not concerned. So he was ridiculed, abused, persecuted, discriminated all these years. He was a Nirdov. Elokim Yivakish Nirdov. So I always pointed out, it doesn't say Hashem Yivakish Nirdov, that the attribute of mercy favors the pursuit. Elokim, even the Midas Adin, even the attribute of justice is an agreement that if you're a pursuit, you deserve mercy. So it says, Es Elokim hisalich Noach. Even the Midas Adin, Elokim was with Noach. Even the Midas Adin agreed. Because the Gemara in Sanhedrin asked a question. There were other tzaddikim in the generation of Noach, but they weren't perfect enough. And therefore, because when the Midas Adin is unleashed, nobody's perfect enough. So the Gemara asks, so why did Noach survive? If even tzaddikim perished in the great flood because they weren't perfect enough, so why did Noach survive? So the Gemara answers, Noach motzachem b'nei Hashem. He found special favor in the eyes of Hashem. But the Gemara doesn't explain what was the basis for that special favor. Doesn't say. The Medrash reveals, gives away the secret. The favor was because he was a Nirdov. That because he's pursued, therefore, as a result of that, he merited that special value. So even the Midas Adin is an agreement that he should be favored. So therefore, the appellation for Hashem is Elokim. As Elokim is Halach Noach. He was able to walk together with Elokim, to coexist with the Midas Adin, because he was a Nirdov, because he was pursued. There's a pasuk in Tehillim we say it every Shabbos. Leiv nishba v'nitke Elokim lo sivzeh. Leiv nishbar v'nitke Elokim lo sivzeh. A broken and smattered heart, Elokim doesn't disgrace. So Rabbeinu Yonah says that if a person is nishbar nitker, he feels devastated because of, and he's at a level of tshuva that he's devastated. He can't coexist with his sin. His conscience totally consumes him. Even the midas adin is an agreement he should be forgiven. Why? So he explains what we said in the Nasana Tokef. We said, what is a person? He's a klicheres nishbar. You're like a broken earthenware vessel, right? That's what we said. It's one we're compared to that, like a broken earthenware vessel. Earthenware vessel doesn't have much value, and when it's broken, it definitely doesn't have any value. But we know that the only vessel that once it's contaminated, it cannot be relieved of that contamination. There's only one kind of vessel. That's a klicheres. Every other vessel, if it's made of other material, you put it in, immerse it in the mikvah, it becomes spiritually pure. The klicheres, what does the Torah say? Yishaver. It has to be broken. As long as it's identified as a vessel, it's contaminated, it cannot be relieved of that contamination. So how do you relieve its contamination? You go and by dismantling or breaking it, it's no longer a vessel. So therefore, if a person is devastated due to his sin, that's the depth of his remorse, leiv nishba v'nitker, the broken heart, the smattered heart, even the midas hadin, elokim lo sivzeh. Okay, that's Rabbeinu Yonah. Elokim yivakish nidaf. What's the difference between a pursued and a person who has a problem? Pursued means that every avenue of escape, every solution that theoretically could exist, this person is in a position, he has nowhere to turn. When a person has nowhere to turn, naturally, or most times, he automatically turns to Hashem. He reaches a level of understanding, he's so negated, at that moment he understands, if not to God, he cannot survive, if not for Hashem. When a person is negated to that degree, even the midas hadin is agreeable, he should be favored. Therefore, it's Elokim yivakish nirdaf. The Elokim, the midas hadin, the attribute of justice, seeks out the pursuit. Es Elokim yisalech Noach. Here we start speaking about the attribute of justice. That's why the world was destroyed. But Noach motza chen b'nei Hashem is because he was nirdaf. And when you're nirdaf, even Elokim is the agreement that that person should be able to survive. Moshe Rabbeinu was pursued by Paro. That's why he had to flee Egypt. And the reason why he merited, after the Chet Egel, why Hashem accepted his supplications, is because he was a nirdaf. That's why he's able to pray and annul the decree that Jewish people should be destroyed, because he was pursued. He was pursued by what? By Paro. And after, who's the next group that are pursued? Yisrael mi'umas ha'olam. The Jewish people are pursued by the nations of the world. Therefore, Elokim yivakish nirdaf. Therefore, the Jewish people have a favored nation status. We have a favored nation status because we're pursued by the world. So that Hashem allows this so much prosecution from the Satan. Satan's prosecute us continuously. So Rosh Hashanah, we silence it with the shofar. But if we can't silence if that's not sufficient. Being in a state of being pursued by the nations of the world, it's Elokim yivakish nirdaf. In that state, even the midas hadin is agreeable. Midas hadin is what? Because there's prosecution of Satan. But if you're a nirdaf, that silences it. That gives us that favored nation status.
No, Noach, though, did not fully turn to Hashem because he was so hesitant or reluctant to go into the teva.
Again, for 120 years, he built that teva. He believed that he would succeed. You don't know if it's a success or not until it's the last moment. After 120 years, all of a sudden he sees, how does a human being, every species, kosher non-species, went into that teva, into that ark? I mean, how does this happen? So the Chazal tell us that at a certain moment, all of a sudden, all the animals, they converged on the teva. Every species converged. The only species that were admitted into teva, if it was a purebred. If they actually procreated with another species, they weren't allowed into the teva. It was a miracle. There was like an invisible force; they couldn't go through that door. But all of a sudden, Noach sees it's happening. Could you imagine? You ever see pictures of the of the safari? You have birds. You have the call of the wild. It's deafening. The whole world is converging. Every species, domesticated on birds, reptiles, insect, everything's coming to the teva. What is as I said, the handwriting's on the wall. Noach realizes the last moment. This is the last nail in the coffin of the world, and all of a sudden, it starts raining. It starts raining. As they said, it's bad news. So until then, he believed he was succeeding. Maybe he did make some bali tshuva, but it's not enough. You have to reach a certain threshold. He did not reach that threshold. What was the proof? Hashem says, go into the teva. What he believed that he succeeded, Hashem says you didn't succeed. To be able to swallow that pill, that all existence now is going into the oblivion, there won't be a trace of that existence, is because of your failing. As I said, that's something was difficult for him to accept. But until that moment, he believed he succeeded. Whatever level of success. We say, in America, we pride ourselves in the tshuva movement. For every bal tshuva you bring and the level of bal tshuva you make, do you know how many people are going out the door? Assimilation. And the amounts of money that are invested in outreach. In Israel, outreach is at a different level. Much more successful in Israel. There, people become bali tshuva compared to the United States by the droves. And I once said to somebody, why in Eretz Yisrael are they successful in tshuva movement? In America, relatively speaking, it's not a successful movement. You have NCSY, you have this. We're talking about the numbers are very, very small. For every one, 100's going out the door. In Israel, it's not that way. So I said the difference is, because I was involved, who founded and launched Lev Lachim? Rav Steinman. Rav Steinman said to me once, he already was in his late 80s. He said to me, he's praying to Hashem, he should give him another 10 years to live. He needs another 10 years to try to accomplish what he hasn't accomplished yet. And that's when he founded the Lev Lachim movement. Within 4 years, it was considered outreach to give children the Torah education. He brought back 70,000 children from Masorati, from secular homes. As a result of that, the parents became bali tshuva. As a result of that, the siblings became bali tshuva. And they did not make a move without his decision. He ruled on every situation. That's what they call in Israel chugi bayit, that classes in people's homes. They have 4,000 volunteers going throughout the country, visiting people, speaking to company, having all these seminars. It was unbelievable what was going on. So I once shared this with somebody who's close with Israel. I said, you know why? Because there's a concept known as Das Torah. The Kiruv movement was based on Das Torah. When it's based on Das Torah, you have a different siyata d'shmaya. In the United States, who runs the tshuva movement? People who have money, and we think you should do this. They tell the Rosh Hashivas what to do. You guys, you don't know how to do it. We know how to do it. Because we have the business experience. We know exactly how to structure it. Okay? More power to you. But you're not Das Torah. In Israel, not a move is made without Das Torah. Whether it was Rebbe Yoshev, whether it was Reb Steinman. In fact, Reb Steinman lived more than 10 years. He lived till 104. And it's still going. It's successful beyond.
Rabbi,
Which is asked by Rabbeinu Bachya. Rabbeinu Bachya asked this question. God knows the future. God's in the future. Why did God create the world? To give people merit. So because you meet challenges, you deserve the reward, which is the world to come to have a relation with Hashem. Hashem knows that tzaddik is going to meet every challenge. The challenge is that he's going to meet. God knows he's going to meet those challenges. So if that's the case, why put him through all the difficulties of life? Put him on the pedestal immediately. The person who's going to be the Rasha, you can't punish a person until he actually crosses those lines. So the Rasha has to exist. You give him a chance. You have choice, but if you don't take advantage, you're going to be punished. You can't punish a person because I know you're going to fail. He has to cross that line. But the tzaddik, God knows he's going to succeed. Why put him through all the difficulties and complications of life? That's Rabbeinu Bachya's question. So he says something very interesting. He says, whenever a person has a choice, why is there a basis for choice? Because you have two sides of the equation, and now you have to make a choice. Is it A or B? Or C, D, or F, whatever it may be. It's always, there is an alternative. You have to have an alternative. If there's no alternative, there's no choice. You have to have a representation of good in the world. And now it's up to people to choose between good or evil. What's good? Is good a good or is evil good? So the tzaddik doesn't exist for himself. The tzaddik, in terms of his own personal success, he doesn't have to come into existence. The tzaddik only exists for the Rasha, because that was the basis that he could have chosen to do the right thing, because he had a representation of good. That's Rabbeinu Bachya. It's an interesting concept. So what I'm saying is, what Elise is bringing up, even though Noach fell on deaf ears in Avram's life, he had no effect on Avram. The world ignored him. Didn't make a difference. Noach was a representation of whatever he represented. He was an alternative. Because of that alternative, maybe that, therefore, Avram was able ultimately to come to certain levels of realization. But so Noach existed not for himself, he existed for others. The tzaddik exists not for himself, he exists for others. That's the reason why I always say, the Gemara says in Tainis, in many Rashis, it says that mis tzaddikim is mechaper al ador. Hashem takes the tzaddik to bring atonement for the generation. You say it's not fair. I mean, the generation needs atonement, so the tzaddik should be taken before his time. Now the question, so the simple understanding is because the tzaddik lives for God, and because he lives for Hashem, that's the reason why he's agreement. If that's the will of God, I'm willing that my life should be taken. But it's more than that. The tzaddik, he only lives for others, and he understands that. In terms of his own level of accomplishment, he doesn't have to exist. He could be given reward and be the world to come initially. He only exists for others. So for the others means my life has to end, so let my life end before it's time. Because initially he's only here for others, that he should be the alternative.